Yo, yo, yo! What it do, though? Jokester, baby, you already know, man. I got a don't I always say that, man?
This is a very special.
Yes, it is. This right here is very special. I got my co-host, Matt Reis, and somebody special in here. Somebody that we are hoping, if we continue to push, will be the next DA of Houston County. So, she really needs no introduction, but I will allow her to introduce herself. Miss Erikka, please tell the people who you are and what you do.
Well, hello, I'm Erikka Williams. I am currently the Chief Assistant for the Houston County DA's office. I am a prosecutor, and I've been a prosecuting attorney for 18 years. Okay. I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio, and I made my way to Houston County when I met my husband in law school. He's born and raised here. I went to local schools, Northside.
Heard about that.
Yeah, that was a rough game. That was a rough game the other night. We were out there. But I am very excited to be running for district attorney. It is time for some change in the office, and I believe I'm the person to bring it. So I am excited to be here and excited to talk to you guys about that.
We're excited to have you. So just so people kind of get an understanding, like what exactly does the DA do?
Well, the district attorney is the prosecuting arm of the criminal justice system. So if someone has been charged with a crime, and usually what happens is someone will be arrested for a crime, and if they're arrested for a felony offense, then it will go to the district attorney's office. Okay. If they're arrested just for a misdemeanor offense, they will go to the solicitor's office. Now, that's not the case in every county. Houston County does have a separate felony district attorney's office and a misdemeanor office. Some counties have them all together. But if you are arrested for a felony offense, then the case comes to the district attorney's office, and it's their job to be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you have committed the offense that you're charged with committing. What happens generally is we will get the case file and we will read it over, look at witness statements. There may be body cams or dash cams or other forms of evidence, and we will make a formal charging decision. And then once we've made a formal charging decision, then if it's a case that is appropriate for a plea, then we will extend a plea offer. And if it's not, or if the defendant doesn't want the plea, then we will get it ready for trial.
That kind of touches on the subject that I'm kind of passionate about, is the plea deal. And it's been brought up a few times from some activists, celebrities, how people are kind of cornered into taking a plea deal. And just curious as to how you can help people kind of free themselves from that mentality that they have to plead.
Well, I can't really speak for what happens in every jurisdiction. I can say that there have been studies done that show that a lot of people are more likely to plead guilty to an offense when they have been incarcerated pre-trial than when they have been released. But most people that have been charged with a crime, it usually means that there is some level of evidence that they have committed an offense. And the reason why district attorney's offices offer pleas, it's not to force someone to plead guilty, but it's to help the system move along. We have a very top-heavy system because we have lots of law enforcement and they make lots of arrests, and anybody that's arrested is entitled to have the charges that are brought against them proven beyond a reasonable doubt. So because we have a limited number, especially in Houston County, because we have a limited number of judges, the plea process is part of what keeps our system moving. Because if everybody wanted a trial and we gave it to them, it would take years to resolve all the cases that we have. So I don't think that it's necessarily the intent of the prosecutor to offer pleas to people just to make them plead guilty. I would hope that ethically that they are looking at the cases and making a plea recommendation based on the facts that they have and what they're able to prove. And there have been in the past cases that people may feel have been overcharged for the purpose of forcing someone to plead. I wouldn't sit here and say that that doesn't happen. It shouldn't happen, but it does happen. But that plea process, because they're on the flip side, people that are not accused of crimes, people that have been victims, or people who know people who have been victims, are often upset at the thought of plea deals. Like, no, if you look at the social media, when they post like a person's been charged with a crime, you'll often see people say, you know, sentence them to the max, no pleas, whatever. But unfortunately, in some instances we do that. In some instances we have to do that. It's just there are some people that are safer. It's safer for the community for people to be removed from society.
Offenders,
right.
Violent
But we can't do that in every case, because most of the time if we say to a defendant there is no plea deal, then those are the type of cases that end up going to trial. Yeah. And again, trials, they take a lot of time, they cost a lot of money, and because we don't have enough judges to really handle all the cases that go to trial, we want to make sure that when we're taking stuff to trial that it is the best cases and ones that really need to go before the judge. So that's one of my, that's one part of my platform, is getting our county to take a better look at some of the cases that we have pending trial, and in the ones that we can extend offers that don't require a trial for, then let's go ahead and do that, so we can free up some of that limited judge space to do some of our more serious cases. I mean, what we do now is, you know, as it shakes out, usually like the murders and the armed robberies, rapes, and the child molestations, they're ending up before the court. But we also have some older cases, driving with suspended licenses and felony shopliftings, that are crimes and should be addressed. But if we can address those without having to have a full trial, then it's my opinion that it's better for everyone involved, because the offender gets an opportunity to resolve their case, and they're not waiting 3-4 years to have a trial on whether or not they stole something from the grocery store. The community is doing better because we're not paying all this money to hold somebody pre-trial, because their history may dictate that they be held pre-trial. And the victim is doing better because it's not 3 or 4 years before they are able to get restitution. Because a lot of people don't understand about the way restitution works, is restitution is ordered by the court, and so it becomes a condition of your sentence. So if your sentence is 20 years, even if it's a 20-year probated sentence, then you have 20 years to pay off that restitution. Wow. So for instance, my father-in-law was once taken advantage of by a contractor. And so the contractor ended up having some sort of restitution he had to pay. And my father-in-law would get these tiny little checks that would come, because he had the entire length of that long sentence to pay it off. And so if we can look at some of these cases, especially where you have a case where a victim is waiting for restitution, if we can get the money for the victim sooner, then that may lead to better outcomes for everybody involved.
I think that's one of the issues that I've seen also is kind of unfair plea deals being presented to the violator or to the accused person. So I think that'd be something I'd be interested to hear, that you are presenting more reasonable pleas.
Well, reasonable is in the eye of the beholder. It's like, certainly it's a lot easier for me to be on this side and say, well, that plea looks pretty reasonable to me. Right. But you want to make sure that when you are making a plea recommendation, that it really does kind of match what the offender is accused of doing. But you also have to factor in, does that offender have a history? And is it a situation where, okay, maybe I'm going to offer you longer probation instead of incarceration, and then they can make that choice. I've had defendants say to me, I've given them a straight probation offer, and they'd be like, no, that's okay, I'll take the serve time. They'd rather be locked up, because they understand that 8 years on paper is a lot different from 8 years locked up, and they would rather deal, because parole tends to not be as strict as probation, or so I'm told. And so that may impact. But yeah, there are times, and things change too. Like with the criminal justice system, they say it's on a pendulum, so it swings one way to the other. So at one point, the pendulum was swinging way far to the right, and we were very proud of saying, yeah, we locked up this person for 30 years because they had crack cocaine. Right, and we're not doing that anymore. We shouldn't be doing that. Right now, the pendulum is swinging towards the other way. We want to focus on treatment and rehabilitation. And there's a concept I worked many years in juvenile court. There's a concept called balance and restorative justice. And because juvenile courts are often described as problem-solving courts, and the goal of juvenile court is rehabilitation of the offender and trying to keep the offender from coming back through the criminal system, as opposed to the adult system where it's a mix of supposed rehabilitation and retribution and removal from society. So some of those concepts of balance and restorative justice, they're trying to weave those into our adult system now, because we're realizing that the way that we are prosecuting cases is not necessarily making us any safer or reducing any crime or anything.
So I was reading, I think, an article about Hartwig in the House and Home Journal, and it was saying it's probably about 1,500 plus cases backlogged. Now, is this strictly due to what you were saying earlier, or is there something else, going on back there that's probably causing this inefficiency?
It's a combination of things. So when they pulled that number of the cases that are pending, I'm not exactly sure if those are cases that I believe it said that those were cases that were indicted and pending resolution. So if that is the case, that is not completely the DA's office fault, but the DA's office definitely has a hand and could make things a little better. Now remember, I told you that we only have 3 judges in the Superior Court in Houston County, okay? If you look a little to the north, Bibb County, I believe they have twice as many judges as we do. Now, they are a bigger circuit, but we have a very large caseload. When you present a case to the grand jury and it is indicted, it becomes pending in the trial, in the line trial. And so once it gets in that bucket, we don't get to determine which cases fall on the trial calendar. So in that aspect, it's not totally our fault, because we need more judges, and that would make things move faster. But understanding that that is not our fault, we need to be looking at what we can do before it gets that point. So are there cases that could have been handled with an alternative disposition? Is a case that could have been handled with a pretrial diversion? Is a case that could have been handled by reducing a felony to a misdemeanor? That brings that number down. Is it a case that just needs to be dismissed because it's stale? That happens too. Because when you've got people waiting 3-4 years for their cases to get resolved, and it's not just a Houston County thing, all throughout Georgia, that's the problem with the law and order aspect, because people say they want law and order, but under the Constitution of the United States, law and order has to not just mean arresting people, but it has to be providing them with the trial that they are entitled to, and paying for their attorney if they need to. And so we can't just lock people up and then say we're done with it. Right. And there's a big push. People are saying law and order, law and order. But really, when people say that, I want people to push back and say, well, what does that mean? What does law and order mean? Because if you arrest someone, they are entitled to due process. They are. I mean, no matter how egregious. So you think back to the, you guys are younger than me, but the Brian Nichols case. I don't know if you guys remember that, but he shot. Yeah, he shot. He was on trial for rape, and he got free. And he shot a sitting judge and a sitting court reporter, and I think he killed a sheriff's deputy, and then he went on a run, and then he shot a marshal, and then he kidnapped a woman, okay? All of this pretty much happened on live TV. Well, guess what? He was still entitled to a trial, okay? Even though there was a courtroom full of people that saw what he did, he was still, and so it doesn't matter if someone's accused of selling drugs or molestation, whatever it is, they're entitled to a trial. So we have to, if we're not gonna, if the state's not gonna give us what we need, then we have to find some solutions that will help, because the criminal justice system really is a drain. It is a drain on our resources. We can't just do away with it. We have to have it, but we've got to see what can we do to make it move just a little bit more efficiently. But to go back to your question, I'm sorry, I kind of sidetracked.
No, it's fine.
But the question about the 1,500 cases, so yes, One of the reasons why I'm running against my boss is because I feel as if he has mismanaged that. The way that he has our office designed right now is I'm the chief assistant. We have a deputy chief that is, I guess in terms of rank, slightly below me, but kind of right where I'm at. And that deputy chief is the person that supervises the attorneys. But we don't really have a system in place to watch that caseload as it's going. And that should change. We should have staff meetings, and we should be talking with the ADAs and wondering why these cases aren't moving, or if they need something to move, what do we need? Or sometimes you just got to cut bait. We've got some cases that have been put into dead docket because the defendant has fled, and that's disappointing for the victim, certainly. But sometimes you just have to look at a case and say, we're not, this is not going to result in a conviction, and be honest with the victims, and they're going to be mad. I can't tell you the number of times I've talked to victims' families, and they've been mad at me because of what it is that I've had to tell them. But that's part of the job. The goal of being a prosecutor is supposed to be justice. Seek first justice. And justice, of course, varies depending on whose point of view it is, right? So if you're a victim of a crime, justice means punishment for the offender, some sort of restitution if you're owed, but if you're the defendant, then justice means what? A fair trial, evidence presented in a fair way.
Nothing cruel and unusual.
A fair treatment from the judge, right? If you're the general public, what justice might mean something totally different. Exactly. So, because sometimes you can even look at some of the ways that we feel about certain laws, they change. They change over time. And that pendulum swings. So things that may anger us and outrage us, 5 years ago may not outrage us as much anymore.
That is true. I've kind of seen like a swing in some of let's just take, Kamala Harris, for example. She was very, very tough prosecutorial, but you can tell there's a change with the shift of how everything's kind of going to more criminal justice. And now she's, co-sponsoring bills about, maybe limiting police and certain things and stuff like that. So I do see that there is that shift.
But even with Kamala, because I'm a huge Kamala Harris fan. Even when she was the elected DA, she was doing things that were very progressive and very considered left-leaning back then, and even in California, right? So, she had initiatives where victims of human trafficking were no longer to be prosecuted for prostitution. I mean, that was huge, And I know a lot of people give her a hard time because they say that, as prosecutor, and it's the same thing they would say about me, as prosecutor, how can you lock up people that look like you? But more often than not, crime is often related to where you are. So your victims are often the same race as you, which is why black on black crime is no such thing. Yeah. There's no difference.
You kill in proximity.
It's proximity, yes. Right? And so when you're talking about, you're putting black people in jail, but you're also finding justice for black victims. Yeah. So you have to look. You don't just look right. We need prosecutors, and we need prosecutors that are progressive, and we need prosecutors that are not so blinded by the black letter of the law that you get unjust results, because that can certainly happen sometimes. As a prosecutor, as a felony prosecutor, I'm back in juvenile court now, but when I was in superior court, I would get cases of kids that were arrested at school because of zero tolerance policies. Okay, so a child brings a 17-year-old comes to school with a knife, doesn't use it offensively, it's in their bag because they hunt or fish or something. Okay, so the law says that that's a felony. Yeah. Okay, so what's the just result? What's going to be best for all involved? Is it just to treat, and I used to teach at Central Georgia Tech, so I used to talk to my students about this too. Like, is it just for everybody to be treated the same? I don't know. Yeah.
That's an interesting perspective.
Because, if the kid that brings the knife to stab somebody and the kid that has the knife because they were careless and didn't check their stuff before they came to school, do they need the same punishment?
Right. So you're saying intention should have some type of...
Well, you want a prosecutor that has good judgment, because the whole criminal justice process is filled with discretion. From the moment it institutes, from the moment the police officer flicks on his blue lights, there's just discretion. From the moment he decides to pull you over and talk to you and ask you, for your driver's license, there's discretion. If there's, if you're speeding, if he makes a decision, he or she, to give you a warning versus a ticket, discretion. You know what I'm saying? You get to the prosecutor and they look, they look at your history and they decide whether or not you should have a trial, or your ticket should be a fine, or your ticket should be jail. It's all discretion. So you want to make sure, and we're human and we will make mistakes, but you want to make sure you have people that are prosecuting that know how to exercise good discretion. They have good decision-making skills.
I think an important aspect of using discretion is to use it, I wouldn't say blindly, but colorblind. There's a lot of issues with people of color getting harsher sentences, getting more unfair plea deals being offered to them, and I think that's something that you will definitely bring to the table versus the current DA. Well,
and sometimes things are not necessarily, they may be black and white and unintentionally. There's a difference between like de facto discrimination and de jure discrimination, and you have to look at, again, because you go back to that discretion. Especially in a small town. Now, Houston County is not a small town anymore, but we operate like we are sometimes. And so you're very likely as a prosecutor to get a call from somebody to say, hey, I know this boy comes from a good family.
Right.
His parents are XYZ. Can we give him a break because he's headed to the military? Yeah. Now, you may not have that same phone call for another youth, just because that's just not. That's not, their family dynamic is just not the same, and maybe their father was incarcerated, but you still want to be able to look and use that discretion and to make sure that you have a fair outcome for both defendants.
Yeah. You had mentioned juvenile court. I'm a big advocate for juvenile justice reform.
No, we're good. So we're about to hit a break real quick. We're going to get to this justice reform, and we'll be back. Yo, what it do though? Joseph, baby. You already know, man. Host a controversial conversation. And look, man, normally I don't endorse or support candidates on my show, but these times are different, and I need change in my community. So, I am wholeheartedly supporting the Erikka Williams for DA campaign, and I hope you do the same.
So like we had mentioned before the break, juvenile justice, I'm a big advocate for reforming the programs. Just kind of curious what you may have in store for us.
Well, I would envision us increasing the use of diversion programs for youthful offenders. Right now, we don't have a lot in Houston County for our youth offenders. In particular, I'm talking about juvenile court. And some of that is just a lack of funding. And so what I would like to do is to use some of our funds that we get from forfeiture cases to help bring some programming for the youth. Like we have a lot of, especially young girls that are struggling with mental illness, and that's what's bringing them to juvenile court. And a lot of them also struggling with like anger management. So I would hope that we could create a program particularly for young women and even adult offenders. I would like to partner with some of our local mental health agencies so that we have some resources to send them to as part of their pretrial diversion, so that we know, if they're suffering from this problem, we know that maybe there's XYZ provider in town, and that they either work on a sliding scale, or we already know in advance if she's got, or she or he has some sort of Medicaid or whatever, he takes that, so that it kind of takes the excuses out of going to get the help that you need.
That's really underrated. I almost see it as more like building the system up for rehabilitation, which it's really intended for, is to rehabilitate the the criminals and reintroduce them back into the system. So yeah, being able to give them some type of help medically would definitely be huge.
Well, we do have, Houston County does have a mental health accountability court in Superior Court. It's a very intensive program, and there have been some people that have really been successful on it, and so I'm hoping that we can sort of recreate some of that down in our juvenile court. Mental health is tough because it usually requires some sort of medication, and especially when you're a child, your medication may be dependent on whether your parent has the ability, the means, or even the desire to make sure that you get to where you need to get your medicine refilled. We had a child in court a couple weeks ago who was being released from the hospital but couldn't get in with their new provider to get the medicine. So of course the child ended up coming off the medicine, waiting to get to the new doctor, and then the child had a new case because partially because the medicine was not correct. And so if we can kind of help, if we can get some more organizations to come in to help in those situations, that may prevent some people from coming back to juvenile court. But we've got a very good juvenile court here. Our judge has always been into the problem-solving model. It can be kind of frustrating when I'm ready as a prosecutor to say, okay, it's time for someone to go to the YDC or the RYDC. But on the preventative scale, I think that she really means a lot, and really would like. I think if we had more resources, we could definitely improve on that.
Yeah, I'm a former behavioral health technician, so with the military, so I'm all about mental health, the resources, expanding facilities and things like that. So I think that's a really, really amazing idea. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to kind of juxtaposition towards kind of like why you're actually running, not why you're running, but if you are working for the DA now, and that is your boss, and you're looking to take his seat, like what is it about him that you feel is a necessary need for this change right now?
There is a complete lack of management in the office right now, and that's probably putting it very mildly. I will say that I have been chief assistant since 2011, appointed by him. Prior to that, I was assistant district attorney in the juvenile and superior court, so I have experience handling all kinds of cases. And in the beginning, my role as chief assistant was a lot bigger. I had a lot more responsibilities, and slowly they just kind of started creeping away. And there didn't seem to be a reason why. There was no write-ups or no issues, no come into my office, let's talk, I'm not pleased with how you do things. And everybody that works in that office works at his pleasure. So he had the ability to have a different chief assistant at any time, but he didn't. Right. And in about September of this year, it became apparent to me that he just wasn't really interested in handling all the business of the office. I mean, we weren't really talking. He wasn't in the office. He wasn't handling cases. He had been appointed to a lot of different committees that would pull him outside of the office, but while he was gone, there really was no one of the authority to do anything. He and his spouse separated, got divorced or whatever, and that became problematic for us because it sounds like I'm getting into the weeds.
Nah, man, go ahead, air it out.
It's important because it really is one of the driving factors in why I'm running, is that he had decided to have a relationship with an employee in the office. And it's a government office. This is not a private business. And it became problematic because that person has authority over other people in the office. And many people, myself included, went to the county commission through the personnel. Like, let me explain the dynamics of the DA's office. We are a hybrid office. A large portion of us are state employees, and another portion of us are county employees. So I'm a county employee. I've been a county employee for since 2002. So we have a personnel department. the DA's office is what is known as a constitutionally elected office, which means you can't fire the DA. The only way that you can get rid of a DA is to beat him at election, or if he does something, illegal, then there is an impeachment process, but that doesn't happen. So the only way to get him out if they don't resign is to run against him. Well, the problems in the office became so bad that I went to the personnel department and said, I don't know what to do. Please help. And was told very kindly that there is nothing that can be done because he's an elected official. Little did I know that when I had been to see him, that several other employees had also been to the personnel department to make similar complaints of being, feeling that they were being mistreated, feeling that they were being asked questions.
How long has this been going on?
I would say, I went to personnel in October of 2019. So I would say sometime around July is when, June, July is when things started really getting weird. But they got bad enough for me to say something in September. And so I said, okay, well, I just want somebody to know because, I'm aware that there's such a thing called a hostile work environment, and that even though we serve at the pleasure of this elected official, that doesn't mean we get to be abused. And so in November, sometime in November, I got into a little quibble with the office manager. I was particularly frustrated because somebody had been hired and I was second in command and I didn't know about it. And when they brought the person in, it was just kind of like, oh yeah, this is Erikka. This is Erikka, she's chief assistant. If you need anything, I can help. Whatever. It just kind of ruffled my feathers that day. Yeah. And so I kind of said something to her snide. I did. And didn't think anything of it because I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cuss. I didn't even tilt my neck or anything. I just, I said what I said. And then a few days later, I get called into the office and get dressed down by the district attorney for what I said. And what made it even worse is that he dressed me down in front of her, in front of the person in which she was the person in which she was living with. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so it was it was at that point that I had enough, and I confronted him and I said, I don't know what is going on between you two, but it is destroying this office. You're not talking to your coworkers. You're not engaging. People don't know what's going on. Talk to us, whatever. And it was at that point, that was our last conversation in person.
Wow.
So, mind you, I'm second in command in the office still. And we have not had an actual conversation face-to-face, like a real conversation, since November of 2019.
Wow.
So in
Very.
December, I kind of felt, after what happened in November, and I knew I had ruffled feathers, and I knew that people that had ruffled feathers before had found themselves without a job. I felt like that was the way that the wind was going, but so I went down to the clerk's office and got myself copies of paperwork that is publicly available. I'm not exactly sure how it got back that I did, but I got it on a Friday. On a Monday, I got an email that said I would be moved effective immediately to the juvenile office, which is located in a separate building. And it was done over email, and it was done over mass email to the entire office.
Wow. Pretty unprofessional there.
Right. So
that's what that is. Just petty.
It's petty. It's petty, man. And that's why and I promise I don't mean to air the office dirty laundry, but I feel like the taxpayers and citizens need to know if the person that's making decisions about whether someone gets to live or die is this petty. Mm-hmm. They should be aware of it.
How long has he been district attorney so far?
10 years. He was elected in 2010. Okay. And he ran a contested race in 2010. And he won it, and then 2 terms uncontested. So this is his first contested election since 2010.
So you worked with the prior DA before him?
Yeah. Well, we all worked together because George was there when I got there, but he left to go be a chief at some he moved to Florida for about 6 months to be a chief of a unit that ended up getting disbanded for, we don't know why, but so he came back as an ADA, and then he continued to be an ADA, and then in 2008 he ran to be district attorney in the Talladega circuit, which is like Monroe butts Lamar County, and he lost that election. So so when Kelly Burke, who was the DA when I started, he's the DA that hired me. When he left, George decided he was going to run, and so he ran. Arthur Creaky ran, and Brad Wilkerson ran. So all three of them ran. The governor appointed Rab to be district attorney. Which was controversial at the time because George was actually the only one of the three that were running that had felony prosecutor experience. You know, Rab was
Defense attorney.
he's a defense attorney. He does criminal law, his family law. He's a great attorney. He's a real good friend of mine. But I remember back then it was pretty controversial because he was like outside coming in. But the interesting thing is that while all that running was going on, Rab didn't fire George. And he allowed him to take the time that he needed to campaign, even after he lost to George. Even after, I'm sorry, that didn't make any sense what I just said, but he gave him the time that he needed to campaign. So, anyways, I kind of got sidetracked, but
That's all great information.
In November, right, after we had our last conversation, so everything that has happened since then between he and I has been done over email. And there's just been a lot of like petty, just petty stuff. Like for instance, I'm a county employee, and there is a requirement by the county handbook that requires all county employees that are participating in contested elections to take 30 days of leave before the election. And I'm not being permitted to do so. And because it is again a constitutional elected office, he doesn't have to let me do it.
Right.
But I mean, it's the county policy, so
So he's allowed to go against policy.
Right, because technically it's not his policy.
Right.
That's why he's allowed to carry on with employees, because technically that's not his it's his office.
And no one's gonna push back.
So it's just kind of a question of morals also.
Right, it's what you do with the power that you have, the authority that you have.
Yeah.
And my biggest concern has always been just how you treat people as a result of the way that you are carrying on your business. If you step out on your wife or your marriage 37 years falls apart, that's not really my concern. But when it spills over into the office in which you have appointed me to be chief assistant, and impacts the employees in which you have asked me to be the supervisor of, then I'm certainly going to exercise the authority that you've given me.
Yeah.
And so that leads to, that leads to where we are, but that is not, that may have been the precipice for me to run, but that is certainly not the driving force.
Right.
I mean, right now, especially in the midst of COVID, we have to take a hard look at how we are prosecuting cases and what we are doing, because a lot of people don't realize as a result of COVID, criminal trials have come to a halt. Because you cannot get 12 jurors safely, socially distanced. Grand juries are not happening. I mean, everything's supposed to start back up next month, but it'll be socially distanced. But so we're pretty much already backlogged because of the lack of judges. Now we're getting backlogged by COVID. So we've got people that have been held in pretrial detention whose cases are just pending, and it's not just that they're going to get credit for. If they get convicted, they'll get credit towards their time served. But what if there is someone, and this is not just Houston, anywhere, what if there's someone that's actually innocent? Yeah, literally. It's a scary time. So we really have to, and COVID is a great way to kind of smooth that over. I mean, we just, the economy ground to a halt. The economy is what pays the tax dollars, which gives us the money to do the jobs that we do. So we just have to really be focused on looking at those cases. I mean, I try cases, I do, but I feel like if elected, one of my first things to do is just start going through this caseload and making sure that I surround myself with people that are going to try cases, but also because they will then become, all the cases will be mine, looking at some of the ones that may be appropriate for more pretrial diversion or even dismissal, just for the sake of judicial economy. And that's the power of the prosecutor. That's the power of the pen. You know, with the signing of my name, a charge can go away.
Yeah.
And so you want to make sure that when you have someone in that position, they make good decisions.
Yeah.
And in my opinion,
Fair
Mr. Hartwig
decisions.
is not making good decisions right now.
Well, I know me and Matt and Tony and everybody else are going to do our best to get you in there and get him out, because it seems that you are authentic, you are genuine, and you care to make these changes. And that's all that we ask for. So I am so grateful that you came on here. Grateful that Matt was able to be here with me.
I'm very thankful.
Yeah, if there's anything that you want to leave with the people, where they can reach you at, how they can donate to you.
Sure. And let me just say one more thing, because I really spent a way more time talking about Mr. Hartwig than I wanted to. I want to make sure that people understand that with the Erikka Williams administration, that there will be a more smart criminal justice reforms. I want to increase the usage of not only the pretrial diversion that we talked about, but I want us to start to have record restriction programs, because record restriction is a powerful tool that's in our arsenal that a lot of people just don't know about, and it's the law.
What is record restriction?
Okay, so record restriction is what is commonly known as expungement other places, but we call it record restriction here. And what record restriction does is allows people that have certain offenses that are eligible to have them restricted from the record so that employers can't see them.
Oh my gosh.
And so there are, and the reason why that's so important is, like, in 2013, they changed the law to make it easier to have your record restricted. A lot of stuff gets restricted from your record automatically, but if you have an arrest that's older than 2013, you may not know that you qualify. You know, back before 2013, if you completed a pretrial diversion program, if your pretrial diversion order didn't specifically state the record shall be restricted or expunged when you complete it, then it's not. So there are probably people out there now that have things that could be restricted that just don't even know it. And so I would like to, Bibb County did a great job, the DA in Bibb County, David Cook, he did a great job by starting these record restriction programs with some local agencies. Let me shout out the Georgia Justice Project, okay? Because I can't give legal advice, but I can tell you to go to the Georgia Justice Project. They have a phenomenal website that gives you all the information about what kinds of crimes would qualify for record restrictions, what don't, you know, what happens if you have a first offender sentence, what you need to do if you have first offender and part of your record is restricted and the other part isn't. And the other great thing about the record restriction is that this year, bipartisan legislature in Georgia created more, they increased what can be restricted from your record. We should be talking about
Yes,
that.
we definitely should.
We are not, and I just don't understand why you know, and a lot of stuff that it will not come into play until January. But we need to be ready in January to hit the ground running, so that when people have these questions about whether or not they qualify for a record restriction, we need to be ready for it. It's the law. You can't say for law and order and only just mean law and order when you lock people up. Law and order means that the law says records should be restricted. Let's help the people do it.
Yo,
so anyways, the last question
huge.
you asked me, I'm sorry, the best way for people to reach out for me, I do have a website. It is www.erikka4da.com, and that is ERIKKAFORDA.com. There are links on my website and on my social media, which is also Erikka4da. I'm actually on Twitter at Erikka4da and Instagram at Erikka4da. There are links to donate if you feel so led. You can send a donation by check. We have PayPal, AxBlue, even Cash App. We appreciate whatever that we get, because this is a county-wide race. So I can't just, say, okay, I know all the people that may be, left or moderate leaning are going to vote for me. I have to be able to reach the entire county and let them know why I am the best choice to lead this office.
Well, you definitely have my vote in the DA race.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
I third that.
Well, y'all heard it here. The next DA of Houston County, Erikka Williams.
Erikka Williams.
So grateful.